All right. Hello, hello. Welcome to another post-game recap for Iowa women's basketball. Today, just going to be going over Iowa's 41-point road win at UNI in front of a record crowd for those girls. Needless to say, there's not going to be too many negatives that come out of a game like this. A lot of positives to take away. UNI in the preseason pick in Missouri Valley. Considered one of the favorites along with Drake. So anytime you can take a team like that and just thoroughly dominate throughout the course of the game, pretty much lead by 10 points the entire span. We got up 10 really quickly and sometimes got to like 9 or so, but never really any lower than that. But yeah, just a really quality performance. A lot of good things to talk about. A lot of good vibes going around. It is kind of interesting though at the same time, and I kind of want to be fair. I don't want to be too unfair to UNI, because a huge caveat coming out of this game is they had their two best players, two players who were first team preseason All MVC. One only played 10 minutes, the other played 18 minutes due to foul trouble. One who played 10 minutes. I presume due to injury. I have not checked up since the end of the game, but I presume due to injury. That throws a major caveat in this entire equation for what you can take away from it. But to be honest with you, even taking that into consideration, even when those players were available in their first half, it really felt like Iowa was, again, in control. They got up double digits very quickly and just never really dipped any lower than that. Despite some shooting struggles in the second quarter and at the end of the first quarter at times. But like, yeah, I don't want to be too unfair to UNI given their situation. And again, it's like you're a mid-major and playing the number 3 team in the country. Like a lot of those kind of teams aren't going to necessarily put up the kind of fight that will make an interesting game. But just not really the kind of game plan that you want to have if you're a mid-major going up against the number 3 team in the country. I don't think 0 assists in an entire half of basketball is very unforgivable. That just can't happen. You're playing a team more talented than you. You can't try and win with individual player talent against a team with Caitlin Clark amongst other talent players in Iowa's roster. You're not going to win that way. And on top of that, it's not really, and this is kind of something, and I pointed out the assists in my preview in the last video, where they were amongst the bottom 20% in all D1 basketball last year in assist rate. So I didn't anticipate them to move the ball necessarily well. They moved a little bit better when their bench came in, just because they kind of had to, because they didn't have as many individually talented players to do in the starting lineup. So their bench moved the ball a little bit better, but still like nothing that amazing. But on top of that, just the pace of playing the game. It's beforehand. You look at their pace stats. It's middle of the pack, so I figured, okay, they'll probably play a more slow-paced game, try and control possession, try and limit Iowa's opportunities, try and keep it close. It's a common strategy you see in these kind of games. Mid-major teams trying to shorten the clock against high-major teams. But they just leaned straight into Iowa's running game, and they were more than happy to make this a track meet. They just kind of let Iowa make it a track meet, and they responded by making a track meet themselves. And one thing that I just kind of wanted to make note of is, and something I noticed, I went back a second time just to make sure of this. I just went through a lot of Iowa's offense possessions. They just did not really make Iowa grind it out in the half court. They really let Iowa be free-flowing. I made a note, Iowa did not have a single possession offense where the shot clock went under 10 seconds until the under 2-minute mark of the second quarter. So you're talking about 18 minutes of game time where it never really felt like Iowa was being disrupted They were getting us out of what we wanted to do. Pretty much what we wanted to do, we were able to do. It was really just a matter of whether we could make shots or not, which there was a little bit of a slump, but that immediately corrected itself throughout the course of the game, which led to a lopsided margin there. But just the way UNI tried to push the pace and tried to run with Iowa and really played an individual brand of basketball, it's just not a recipe to be a team that's objectively more talented than you. It's just not a very smart recipe. And at the same time, it's like if you're UNI, that's how you play, and it's clear if you look at statistics, like, okay, they're an individually oriented team. They want to ask their players to make one-on-one plays. And that's fine when you're going to Carbondale to play SIU, you're going to Valparaiso or whatever, or UIC, you're playing one of those kind of Missouri Valley teams. Again, it's the number 3 team in the country. It's just, they just really kind of let Iowa play their game. And there was a moment in the first half. It came after, it was a really great pass from Clark. She drove left along the baseline. She got double teamed, and it wasn't quite a no-look pass. I thought it was a no-look pass first, but it wasn't. But it was a really sick pass between the 2 defenders, Daddy O'Grady, who got fouled. And it was only a 10-point lead that time. It was before the first media timeout. And after Clark had made that pass, she was already just like running down the court. I couldn't see her face, whether she was staring down the UNI bench or the crowd. But clearly feeling confident, feeling very good about what she was doing, and wasn't really that concerned. It's one of those things, you look at Iowa's body language throughout this entire course of this game. Even when it was kind of close, it's like they would show a zoom of Iowa's players on the court, and it's like they just looked really relaxed. Quite a lot of smiles and laughs going around, which is just, that's not a good sign when your opponent is just playing so carefree. And it really felt like Iowa was playing carefree. And again, that says a lot about Iowa, because Iowa has an experienced roster with veterans who are used to playing these kind of road environments, so they're not phased, so they're able to play relaxed in this kind of environment. UNI's players might have been a little bit more tense. They're not used to this kind of thing. But it's just something to notice that Iowa's body language just throughout the entire course of the game, even when there were struggles, was really relaxed, and it just never felt like we were really stressed. I was really hoping that UNI would provide more of a test and maybe slow the pace down or do something to throw Iowa off, and they just didn't, honestly. But it's a credit to Iowa. They took advantage and had an outstanding game against a team that will still do well in the Missouri Valley. They're just not really, UNI is just not really set up to beat, I think, more talented teams than they are. I think they're a little bit too one-on-one oriented. But anyway, enough talking about UNI. That's just kind of a spiel I'm going on. I don't want to be too unfair to them, because they were missing, for huge chunks of this game, their 2 best players, but it just didn't feel like they put themselves in a position to win. 0 assists in a half is just unforgivable, honestly. I don't know how you can forgive that. But moving on to Iowa, because that's what I want to talk about. So I want to talk about defense first, and again, bearing in mind that UNI played a very one-on-one oriented basketball. This is really a guard your yard kind of game. Guard one-on-one, don't get beat off the dribble, etc. And I thought we handled that pretty well. I think I might even be underplaying if I say really well, because you can always nitpick, like, oh god, that player kind of got beat this one session, that player got, but honestly, it'd be so nitpicky just to even do that. It was really a well-rounded game defensively. There were a couple times when Grace Bofelli, particularly early in the game, was able to get to the rim, but even then, it was kind of contested. It was in traffic. It was a tough finish. It was still pretty solid defense, and she's a good player. But other than that, it's like, for the most part, really, really good individual one-on-one defense. And this is kind of like, and I think there's something to be said when you talk about defense and when you talk about recognizing defense. There are certain plays that I think fans are able to easily recognize like, oh, that's a great hustle play, or oh, that's a great steal, that's a great block. But I think there's something to be said for like just not making any mistakes, and it's just like you almost don't even notice the defenders out there. And what I mean by that is like they're not doing anything wrong. They're doing exactly what they're asked to do. They're not making any mistakes and just playing good defense. I just want to take an opportunity to shout out people like Kate Martin, who I don't know if I've talked enough about because you kind of take it for granted. And in a game like this, it's like you just kind of watch her and it's like, man, it's just not taking a single, not making any mistakes defensively at all. There's only one foul that I know she was called for that I just disagree with. It was a drive along the baseline, and she did a good job of, in my opinion, like showing her hands and avoiding the body contact and slapping down the ball, got it clean, but they still called a foul. But it's whatever. You kind of expect some inconsistent refereeing, honestly. Unfortunately, in women's basketball, which could be improved. But you learn to like, you don't necessarily always take the time to appreciate someone like Kate Martin because she's just always there and just always solid. It's kind of like you give her the nickname of the glue, which is maybe a corny nickname in a certain way, but honestly, it's really fitting because it's like she's just there, consistent, holds everything together, and solid. And like glue, you're not really supposed to notice glue. It's just there, it just keeps everything together, and it's just kind of apt in this case. Like you don't know it. Like I'm talking about like okay, you can maybe nitpick this person made a mistake here, this person nitpick this person making a mistake somewhere else. But like you just don't see that at all with Kate in this game. Just pretty much spotless defensively. And I just thought like, okay, it's like I don't give enough credit probably to a player like that. And I feel like when you don't notice somebody, like you get a sense like, are they doing something wrong? But like silence isn't weakness. Silence could be weakness, I guess. But silence doesn't equal weakness. Silence can be strength. And when somebody's silent, that doesn't necessarily mean they're not doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing. And they're not having a great game. And this is one of those cases where it's like, she's silent in the sense that you're not really noticing her, but like if you really watch it, like really pay attention, like just pretty much spot on. And everything she's doing out there, and giving great effort as she always does. Getting rebounds, running the floor, hustling, cutting off the ball. Just I thought I would give a shout out to that because I just don't feel like I have done that enough this year, honestly. She's a really quality, again, glue player. And she's earned that moniker. She's a great player. So I think overall, there's honestly really not that much to say defensively. Again, like the nice thing about a game like this, I guess, is you get to see more of maybe your second or third stringers, particularly in the fourth quarter. And so it's interesting to get a look at those girls. And they played a particular lot of zone during that stretch, which, I don't know, it just kind of whatever. Nothing really stood out during that period of time. I wouldn't say anyone really stood out then. The only thing I will say is there was one moment when like, and it's kind of funny because she immediately was just like laughing about it, like immediately after, like, oh God, what did I do that for? Taylor McCabe just got caught ball watching one time that I saw. But again, it's like that's nitpicking, and she knows she made a mistake there, but again, it's nitpicking. You can find like little things like that throughout the course of the game for other people. Not really much to say there. There was one time, and again, this is a little bit nitpicking, but it's kind of a thing. Jada Giamfi, it was near the end of the game. Just had a position. She's like, UNI shot the ball. It was a missed shot, and she was really an ideal position for the defensive rebound. There was no one really around to contest her. She just kind of batted at it. It's like, no, that should probably be a rebound. But again, it's late in the game. I don't want to nitpick that too much. I just feel like that should have been a rebound. It's like, oh, okay, that's a little like backstage goal, but again, that's garbage time for you. That happens. So I think, and it's hard to take too much defensively because again, honestly, it's like UNI just really just test us 1-on-1, not really much in many other ways, which I think Iowa held up 1-on-1. So overall, good defense performance to hold them in check. So thinking about Iowa offensively, this was we can get to someone like, we can talk a lot about like Caitlin Clark and the triple-double, but I thought this was a really outstanding game from Iowa's three centers. Excuse me. Multiple great passes from all three players, which is like, you're used to seeing that kind of passing because Monica was a great passer, Megan was a great passer, but they all just showed again, and that's a credit to coaching, but it's also a credit to the players. Great vision. Again, those kind of plays where they have the ball in the block, player cuts to the middle, and they're able to hit them with a little bounce pass. Several times. One time, Addie O'Grady hit Kylie Fierbacher. She was coming on the baseline in a similar kind of situation. It's like, yeah, it's just great. Sharon, Addie, Hannah all showed their passing chops in this game, and that's really great to see. Particularly because we still, I think, want to have that ability to play through the post, and if we're going to play that through that post at times and try and take some pressure off Caitlin, they need to show that passing ability, that ability to create for other people, and I think they show that in this game. On top of that, really outstanding, great job getting post position. Just so many. It never felt like we were being pushed out to 10, 8, whatever feet. It felt like constantly our feet were in the restricted arc when we were receiving the ball, and then we were able to just turn and go with a quick layup. And when you get deep post position like that, it doesn't give the defense time to double team you or anything. It's just you don't have to dribble. That was really good work. And UNI might have been a little undersized, but honestly, like, they had some bodies that I feel like couldn't compete and maybe push Iowa out in the post, and we just didn't let them do that, and that was really good to see. And this is just kind of crazy when you talk about like the strength of your centers. It's not just like in post positions. Like you think about like Hannah Stolke, and it was just funny in this game how there were multiple times when she put the ball on the floor and took it right at somebody and just knocked them off their feet multiple times, and she still manages to, and she doesn't get bounced. She doesn't get knocked off bounce. The other player does. There are a couple times she sent them flying to the floor, but she stays on bounce. That's really strong basketball. Really good there. Really good. Really athletic. Showing great athletic power. Not just athletic power, but also control. That really stood out at a point in the second half. Like, oh, she's just completely taken it to these girls. Just able to impose her will while still maintaining under control. That was just funny multiple times. Like, oh Lord, they're going to be feeling some of those bruises as they got knocked down to the ground later in the day. One thing I will say though, when it comes to, there was one time when Hannah did get pushed out a little bit, like probably like 6 or 7 feet or whatever. And she tried going with her left hand, and it looked a little bit awkward. I don't want to overreact to like one single sequence in a game because that's stupid. I will say, like, okay, it's like, hopefully she can show some more comfort level going forward with that left hand, which I'm sure I would expect to see that. But again, it's just one play. I wouldn't go too crazy about that. It's just something to keep in mind. Addie O'Grady did have a great finish with her left hand at one point. Again, got great position, went up with her left hand. She showed that in the games I've seen so far, ambidextrous, which is good to see. Maybe honestly a propensity to go to her left hand. Yeah, and that's great to see. It was great to see her also get some playing time in. I thought she hustled and showed great effort. A couple moments, and you saw there was a point later in the game when the coaches were making note of it. She didn't stay vertical on an instance defensively. There were a couple moments like that, and I thought she showed great verticality in some of the other games I've seen her in, so I'm not terribly worried about that. But it's like, okay. But it did show great effort. And I thought excellent passing throughout the course of this game and some good post moves. Yeah. Gosh, golly. And Sharon, similar vibes, multiple great passes. There's one instance where she got an offensive rebound where she did a really good job of keeping the ball above her shoulders. That's good to see. Fundamentally sound there. Yeah, I'm just overall really happy with what I saw from post play. I think that might be been one of the bigger takeaways offensively. Is just how the good post position we got, how comfortable players looked playmaking for themselves and others in that spot. And UNI's not the tallest front court or anything. They're still a Missouri Valley front line, but they couldn't compete ish in the front court. And I thought we really showed well there against a really good player. Like Bofelli is the preseason Missouri Valley Player of the Year, and we did a great job there. I think there's a lot of credit to be had there. All right, so Caitlin Clark, the new queen of Iowa women's basketball scoring, #1 now, passing Megan Gustafson. It was great. They ran this baseline out of bounds play multiple times. It's nothing too complicated. It's just like a trend you particularly notice going in this game. It's like, oh wow, it's like I think so baseline out of bounds, dead ball situation, you're under the basket, and Clark is generally an inbounder for us. And so what I noticed, and this, I think I saw this baseline out of bounds play like 4 or 5 times in a row. It's hard to keep track sometimes, but it's nothing too complicated. All Caitlin would do is just throw the ball out here to the strong side wing and just curl around a double pin down screen from 2 players along the paint and just receive the ball at the opposite elbow and just go to work. That's how she got the bucket that gave her the all-time scoring record. Nothing too complicated. It's just like a little trend I noticed. Like, oh wow, they really love just having her curl to the opposite elbow after inbounding the ball, coming off a double pin down. But yeah, it's like a really great performance. I thought she picked her spots really well. UNI was throwing double teams at her. They weren't allowing her to get bucket downhill in transition. They were making sure to build a wall with multiple defenders around her when she was working in transition. And she did a good job of passing out of that and finding players. A few more turnovers than I guess I'm used to at this point. But that being said, there's nothing there from a turnover standpoint that concerns me. A couple weird travels that you just like, I'm not worried about that. She's got great footwork, so no worries there. I still kind of laugh at that play where she drove along the left baseline and just split the defense to throw to O'Grady and just like just running down the court like, oh yeah, that was. You could tell she was having fun even early on in the game. The entire team was having fun. That's great to see. I feel like some people just like act like it's not okay to trash talk or have fun on the court sometimes. Like, no, just have fun. Who cares if they're trash talking? Who cares? It's just fun, man. But yeah, I think it's for the most part standard performance. I think she picked her spots well. I don't think there's really too much to say. It was a kind of, I guess you could say, a quiet triple-double, but like she just took what the defense gave her and was effective and did her thing. A couple good behind the backs in traffic too. It's like, ooh, still great. But anyway, it's nice to see Gabby Marshall also get going too. Again, I said in the last video, like, oh, we kind of seen this last year, slow start and then gets going. And you don't want to assume that Gabby's going to do what she did last year and turn it on, because last year's last year. It's not necessarily going to happen this year. But at the same time, she's proven she's a good shooter. 5 threes in this game. She's going to be fine there. Great job of running down the floor in transition, and great job of Clark finding her. And she does what she normally did defensively. Rock solid there as well. And again, it's like just having fun, pretty clear. The entire team's having fun. It's great to see that. One thing you kind of want to note also, just kind of, again, thinking about the players in the bench, so you don't necessarily get a chance to see them much. Not that she's like, doesn't play, because Taylor McCabe does play a little bit here and there. She's found minutes consistently at points. But her first 3-point make was like one of the more impressive one of the more impressive threes you'll see. It came off a really good contest from the UNI player who did really well to recover, get into her space, while she was shooting, but like just such a quick release and so comfortable even despite having somebody right in your face. That's just there's a lot of good shooters on this team. Gabby's a great shooter. Caitlin's obviously a great shooter. Kate Martin can shoot. You have players who can make threes in spots, like Sydney Atfolter, Kylie Fierbach, Molly Dix, etc. Now Hannah Stolke, which we'll get to in a little bit. But it was really, I don't know how many of our shooters can really make the kind of shot she made in her first 3-point attempt. I forget the exact timestamp. But it was just like, wow, it's like to be able to get that shot off that quickly against that kind of defensive pressure and look so easy and comfortable doing. It's like, I think Caitlin obviously makes a ton of contested threes off the dribble and off the catch as well. Gabby is capable of making contested threes off the catch, I could say. Kate Martin to a certain extent, but like, man, it's like I don't know if like anyone other than maybe Caitlin could have kind of made the kind of shot that Taylor made there, which is like, okay, that's the shooting potential that you see, and we know she's a great shooter. Brought the ball up a couple times in the point guard position again, but again, it's just in garbage time. You saw Molly bring the ball up at times then, Kylie too. So it's nothing, I wouldn't read too much into that because Caitlin's still going to be the primary point guard and Molly's second. But yeah, it's like really a high shooting potential, high level shooting. Again, I pointed out the one defensive mistake earlier. I wouldn't read too much into that, but again, if she can be consistent in just the overall floor game, defense, moving out the ball, playmaking, dribbling, passing, whatever you have, if she can just be solid in her overall floor game, that shooting potential is just, it's really something. I can't wait to see what she can turn into going forward in the future, whether it's this year, next year. There's a lot of potential there. So I said I wanted to talk about Hannah Stolke shooting. So this is something, and what did Hannah shoot from the free throw line in this game as well? Was it 2 for 4? No, 3 for 5. 3 for 5, but the thing that stands out is the 1-3. It's great to see that. I kind of like, and I try and focus on some of the negatives too. And there was a missed shot she had. UNI was playing in the zone, and she flashed in the middle of the zone. And she hesitated a little bit, and eventually took a mid-range shot there and missed it pretty badly. But it was nice to see her rebound from that and attempt that three not too much longer afterwards and take it with a lot of confidence. And I think when it comes to this kind of situation, what I noticed with that situation where she was in the mid-range working against the zone is I just don't think she was really ready to shoot the ball when she caught it in that case. Just kind of like, it's like she was looking for a passing option and she realized, oh, I'm open, I'm going to shoot. And it's like, no, you just kind of lost your flow and rhythm. You can't really think that way. You kind of have to look to score first, because if you look to pass first, I think it's hard to kind of go back and get a good feel for shooting. It's kind of weird in that way. You have to almost look to score first before you start thinking about, okay, let's create for other people. You have to like have that mindset of scoring first. I think she just wasn't really ready to shoot, and that's why it's kind of a bad miss there. But in the 3-point shot she got in the corner off a Caitlin pass, ready to shoot. Does not have the quickest release. She still needs time to get her shot off. But the good news is she plays the center position. Most players aren't going to be able to contest her that far out, that closely anyway. So the fact she needs some time, and she doesn't have the quickest release doesn't really bother me too much. And people close out too quickly on her. She's just going to be able to drive right by them because she has the athleticism and ability to do so. But again, I think it's just like a mindset of like, okay, like having the confidence, like in the mindset of being ready to shoot. I think if you have that mindset, I think she's not going to be the best shooter in the world, but she can make shots. And being respectable will do a great deal for what Iowa can do, what she can do offensively. A lot of potential there. And again, still maybe at some point in this year, I'm probably going to say it's still a work in progress here shooting-wise. But again, be patient with it. And hopefully she continues to develop that confidence and belief that she can make those kind of shots consistently. Okie dokie. So I think for the most part, that's all I want to say from this game. Again, a really quality performance. There's really not too much to say negatively, unless you really want to nitpick, and I'm king nitpicker today, but what have you. When you beat a really good team like this by 41, even if I don't think they necessarily came out with the right approach, you're still beating a potential NCAA tournament team by 41 points. That's a good performance on the road. No shame in that whatsoever. So getting to awards, I shouted her out a little bit earlier, but Kate Martin, I want to give her defensive/hustle player of the game. Not that I think there's like any like, oh wow, she's hustling super plays in this game. Not that she wasn't hustling. She's always hustling. It's Kate Martin, for crying out loud. But just really solid, just no mistakes. And it's like honestly, like, amongst all the players I saw today, it's like again I'm getting the king nitpicker, and she's like, I can't nitpick that. I just can't. It's just too good. It was a really good defense performance, I thought. Stop calling for bullshit referee. Stop calling for bullshit fouls, referees, please. Like, come on. Stop doing that. And the game ball, gosh golly, I kind of want to give it to Caitlin because, again, you break an all-time scoring record and you get a triple-double in the same game. It's like, you almost deserve the game ball, but I kind of want to give it to Gabby Marshall. Her shooting ability, I think, really broke the seal and really opened the floodgates for the blowout that we got. Did a great job running the floor, took advantage of opportunities. And again, when you think about it, UNI is trying to deny Caitlin the ball. They're trying to get the ball out of her hands. Somebody's got to step up, and she stepped up to the plate. Did exactly what you want her to do. And again, and you take what the defense gives you, and she opened the floodgates, and I think her three-point shooting ability sparked this blowout. It might have been like, maybe she has a little off day, maybe we're just like kind of like slugging our way along. I don't know if that's the right word. Slugging our way along to make maybe like a 10 to 15-point win. But I think her three-point ability just, and that confidence, I think that just inspired the team and just like brought the energy and the good vibes that just like kept the team afloat and kept them going at a good level, and which allowed them to win by 40-some points. So I think for opening the floodgates, I'm going to give it to Gabby Marshall. If you want to give it to Caitlin Clark, that's fine, but she doesn't need every single game ball in existence. She's got enough awards. She's got enough awards. Gosh golly. So all right, so looking ahead to the next game, Kansas State Wildcats. WNIT team last year, despite the fact that they upset us in the third game last year. Kind of interesting team. They returned their top 4 players in minutes, but probably the most interesting dynamic going for them is Ioka Lee, a 6'6" center, currently averaging 23 points per game for them. Missed all of last year due to a knee injury, so was not available when K-State beat Iowa last year in Manhattan. And you think like, you look at her stats, 15 points per game every single year she's been in college. And just multiple blocks per game. has averaged at least 2 blocks every single year. So presence around the paint. Really efficient around the rim. Let's pull up her stats from 2 years ago. So yeah, does the vast majority of her damage in the paint. And 94th percentile in paint 2-point attempts. So she does a lot of her damage around the rim. No 3-point attempts. Not really her game. And they return their four returning lead players in minutes. They return all those players. They're all in that 5'11", 6'1" range, surrounding her. And they take a high volume of threes, but they didn't make a lot last year, which is interesting. Yeah. Wait, what? They only shot what was it? 29% last year on threes. Yes, they only shot 29% last year on threes. And they didn't have the paint presence that Lee provided last year to maybe attract double teams and then kick it out for wide open threes. So maybe those 3-point shots were more difficult. They did take a lot of threes last year as well. They might have been forcing some of those. I couldn't say without watching the play. But I imagine having a player like Lee in the game, like again, that only attracts more attention. That only forces defense to maybe double team. That leaves somebody open. Based on Iowa's strategy against Virginia Tech, I would anticipate Iowa's probably going to double in this game, but I don't know for certain. Yeah. Another interesting thing too is last year, high-paced team, high-paced team, one of the faster teams in all college basketball. This year, like one of the slower ones. Amongst the lowest 10% of teams in terms of pace or tempo, really slow, which kind of makes sense again. It's like last year you didn't have the 6'6" center to play with, and this year you do. You have a player like that, you're just going to naturally play at a slower pace. This kind of makes sense. So they would play at a slower pace. It'll be interesting to see if they get back to maybe playing more of a middle of the pack pace in this kind of game. But again, talking about what I was kind of hoping maybe to get out of this UNI game is I was hoping Iowa would maybe play a team who would try and control the pace a little bit more and try and make us work in the half court, just to see what Iowa can do there. And again, K-State plays one of the slower paces right now in the entire country. So it'll be interesting to see, like, okay, it's like, do they try and make it a half-court game, and how does Iowa respond? And I imagine Iowa's going to try and do their best to make it a full-court game like they did against Virginia Tech. Run the floor, try and beat that center down the floor, try and get your guards running down the wings, and having Caitlin find them. So that'll be interesting to see how that battle goes. So also taking note, it's a team that pretty clearly believes in analytics. They take amongst the fewest amount of mid-range twos amongst any team last year in the nation. And they're adding Ayoka Lee, but she doesn't live in the mid-range. So I imagine they'll stay consistent. Not really a team that relies on mid-range shots. Again, they take a high volume of threes, and they rely on Ayoka around the rim. It'll be interesting to see if they are able to shoot the ball better this year, because last year, below 30% from the three-point line is a very poor percentage. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I'm not sure how that'll translate. So speaking of last year's game, it was just kind of interesting to go back and look through maybe some of the stats that I saw from last year's game. Like, why did I lose that game? I don't believe it was on TV, so I don't think people could see it. So it just kind of leaves you wondering, like, okay, what happened? And so just one kind of thing that just catches my eye immediately from the box score is Kansas State attempted 13 more field goals than Iowa did. Iowa had 13 turnovers. We didn't get that many offensive rebounds. Kansas State had more offensive rebounds. They got a higher percentage of their misses than we did. So they won the rebounding battle last year. Iowa rebounded them by 2, but if you look at the rebounding percentages, they got more offense rebounds based on percentage than we did. Iowa got more 2 more rebounds just because they attempted a lot more shots than we did. And again, they took 36 threes in last year's game. They take a high volume of threes. That's one of the things you notice. In that game, they shot a little bit better than they did on the year, 30%. Iowa had a kind of cold shooting day, 30% from 3 last year. Caitlin didn't have a very good game, only 6 for 17. So again, it's going to be interesting. Kind of had a field goal attempt edge last year. Does that kind of continue? What's their turnover percentage? So last year, they're okay at taking care of the ball. They don't turn the ball over a great deal, but they're not like you'd say turnover proof. It'll be interesting to see how that goes out. You never really want to get outshot by 13 shot attempts. That's just not a good recipe to win. It pretty much means you need to significantly outshoot like the other team percentage-wise in order to win. And this is not really what you want to rely on because shooting can come and go at times. But again, an interesting opponent. An experienced team too. Again, all their 4 top players and then it's coming back along with an objective, a really good player in Lee. It'll be a challenge. But again, it's at home. And even though they returned a lot of players from last year, it was still a team that went 5-13 in Big 12 and made the WNIT. Again, but they did beat us last year, so they're clearly capable of it. But it's still a game you ideally would hope that Iowa would be capable of winning. So yeah, it'll be an interesting one. I would expect a good performance, but a good opportunity for a revenge game. But we'll see. Kansas State does pose some challenges, and they kind of have a model for how Iowa's going to play a center like Lee, and they can maybe take some notes from how Iowa played Kit Lee and say, like, okay, like we know this is how Iowa might approach us, and that might give them something to scouting-wise an advantage. But again, Iowa's also play a 6'8" center this year, so it gives us an advantage because we know what we want to do in that situation. We saw it work. So it'll be a fun game. And I think will be it for me. I'll see you around.